It's so simple, but it's so powerful. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andrew. Today I will be reviewing The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Is now in contention to be one of my most annotated books ever. I never read The Hunger Games until this year. I had every intention of reading it. I never was not trying to read it. I had seen all the movies when they came out, so I kind of felt like, oh, I don't need to read the books. The book obviously is different, and there are a million themes here to discuss with The Hunger Games. Like, there's just so much to talk about in here and look to in our current society, our current political climate, just so much. This is a book that forces you to confront your own inaction and your own complacency. This book takes these horrific things because, if you're unaware, Suzanne Collins has said that she was inspired to write this by flipping through television and watching the war in Iraq in the year, like 2001 or 2, whenever that happened, and then also saw these glitzy, glammy reality television shows. And she thought, what will it take to get people to care? So she wrote this book. Books are political. This is one of the most politically charged books ever written, I think. So we're gonna go into for this one because she is who she is. I think we're gonna get into full spoilers. I have still only read the first book. I have not continued the series because I want to make sure that I'm focusing only on the events of book 1. So this book is a masterpiece, very political. Where do we even start? One of the things that you get in the book that you don't get in the movie is a lot of Katniss' internal thoughts about, everything that happens. Obviously that's, I think, the benefit of the book. I think that's why people sometimes say the book is always better, because the internal thoughts of your character are just hard to put to screen in a way. And I think they did a good job with the movie, but the way she thinks about her father, the way she feels like her father's death has affected her, is much more explored in the book. Like, there's just several little scenes throughout the book that just make you realize, like, oh, she's thinking about her dad, and like this whole entire backstory. It's been a long time since I watched the first movie, so it could be in the movie, I just don't remember. But there's a whole scene where she's talking to Peeta about, like, how her father could sing, and the singing that he did, like, and how good he was at singing affected her. And I just don't remember that being in the movie. I'm not saying it isn't, I just don't remember that, or I just think it was done better in the book, if it was. I also just love how Katniss is a character with so much agency. One of the things I always love in any book is a character who has incredible agency. Like, the character is driving the plot. The character's actions are what moves the story forward. Like, I hate books that have, like, just a completely, like, a protagonist just getting thrown around and it just feels like the plot is moving the character as opposed to the character themselves pushing forward. And one of the ways that Suzanne Collins, like, does that is, like, of course, the very famous scene made so famous by the iconic Jennifer Lawrence, when she is at the reaping and Prim gets called to go to the games. And again, not discussed in the movie, in the book, Prim has her name in that little bowl, like, once or maybe twice. And we are learning through Katniss' exposition, I guess, she's telling us as the reader that, like, in order to get more resources for your family and prevent yourself from dying, you can get these resources, but the trade-off is that you then have to put your name into that bowl more and more times, therefore increasing your chances of being called to go into the games. So Katniss' name is, I remember I wrote a sticky note that specifically said there's 8,000 people in District 12, and Gale had his name in there 42 times, and Katniss had it in there 20 times, and Prim was only in there 3 times. So the odds were not in Gale's favor. There's also just a really simple scene, but knowing, with the frontal lobe fully developed, there's a scene where Gale is interacting with a character that's wearing this, like, sparkly pretty dress or something. It's just a pretty dress, and he has this, like, thought, or he says something to Katniss that's, like, in a way you can tell that he's, like, angry at her. And is he angry at her because of her own actions. No, he's angry at her because she is the product of this system where she is benefiting from her ancestors. She has access to these things because of where she's come from. So Gail has this like bias against her, but is that really fair? Because you can't help where you come from. Like, it's crazy to me that it's literally page 22. Page 22, that's how early in the story we see Katniss volunteer for her sister. And then, like, literally one page later, we see the visual. This is such a, I was thinking, there is absolutely no way on earth that this book could have been written before television. Like, there is no way that this story could be what it is without the visual medium of television. And, like, Katniss knowing everything that she knows about the games because she has seen the games throughout her entire life. She has a strategy for the games because she's been forced to watch the games her entire life. She has certain dislike for people because of what she's seen on TV. There's just so much commentary in here about the importance of the visual medium. The Capitol using visual cues to force its population to witness these horrific things. Like, it's forcing these people to do it, and it's trying to say, like, look at where we are because of our history. But one of the things that Katniss sees visually is the other districts' reapings. And we see Rue get called, and there's no one to volunteer for her. She has no older sister to protect her. It's also just an interesting fact here that Katniss, in her perspective, we're learning that she has done a lot of stuff to help these peacekeepers, these people who are they're enforcing the law, but they themselves are also not in the best position, and she can hunt very well. And she uses that to her advantage. And these peacekeepers, like, it's all throughout the book. Several times, like, we learn that she provides value to these people who are trying to oppress her. So there's this, like, she's just the perfect martyr in a way to set off the story. And of course, like, Peeta is also called to the games, and when we're first introduced to him, we learn how, like, he gave Katniss the bread, and I don't get how people can read this and not love Peeta. I mean, I can get if you're one team or the other, whatever. I don't know. And of course, Josh Hutcherson is looking how he looks. So definitely helps the case. Peeta is just, I want this book from Peeta's perspective. I want this book from every other character's perspective, even like Kato's perspective. I just think it is, because once we get into the games, before we get into the games, there's all of this, like, doubt. Katniss has all this doubt about Peeta and his strategy and what he's planning to do, and then they're training together, and then they start to train separately. And so Katniss is, like, thinking, okay, like, this is where, like, we are no longer going to care about each other. We are now going, like, it's going to be every man for himself in these games. But we never get Peeta's perspective, so we don't know what is going on in his head. It is seemingly obvious to us as the reader that Peeta loves that girl, and she herself is just, she seems to me, I'm kind of reading her as, like, she comes across as, like, asexual. She seems very uninterested in anything to do with a romantic partner. And I think a lot of people argue that she should have just been single, and I agree so far. I've only read one book, but again, the visual medium as a factor and the importance here, like, if there's a whole entire group of people behind the enhancement of the entertainment value of the games. Like, their whole entire job is to get people watching, because if you could just get people to stop watching, it's contradictory kind of, because it's like, you don't want people to watch because them watching means they're getting the strategy in there. It's like keeping this thing happening over and over again. But if no one watched it, what would happen? If the arena opened up and all those kids just sat there and didn't do anything, and they themselves took it upon themselves to just not do anything, like, what would the Capitol do? I mean, based off of what we know, I think the Capitol would be trying their hardest to, like, they're clearly always encouraging a fight over and over and over again. They manipulate the weather in order to make people get to a certain point and interact with each other. That was a great visual representation, I think, in the movie that they did there. Also, the other thing that I find so interesting is that in the book, I don't even think Snow has any dialogue. If he does, it's very, very little. You know, it's just him announcing things. He doesn't have an interaction with Katniss. I think that's in the movie. It's been, again, so long since I've seen it. But like, we don't get any insight into Snow in the way that we do with Kat. Like, we're so focused on Katniss' perspective. Okay, and to talk about Effie and Haymitch, I think there's such an interesting like parallel between the two of them. I find so fascinating because Effie, at least in the first book, is trying her hardest to like, you know, get these kids to buy into what's about to happen, and like, you know, she's very optimistic about the future, versus Haymitch is very upset and bothered and just hasn't given a fuck for like a long time. And I know really need to read the sequels because, and the new book that came out, I need to read them. Like, this is what I think makes me as the reader want these other perspectives, is the way that Suzanne writes, because she's saying here, I try and imagine for a moment what it must be like inside that woman's head. What thoughts fill her waking hours? What dreams come to her at night? I have no idea. And you kind of read that and you're like, well, now I want to know exactly that. I'm going to go back to page 5 real quick. Another thing that just hits so hard, if you've lost a parent, I'm so sorry, but this sentence talking about her father, it says, the numbness of his loss had passed, and the pain would hit me out of nowhere, doubling me over, racking my body with sobs. Where are you? I would cry out in my mind. Where have you gone? Of course, there was never any answer. Girl. This other thing in here, there's this theme of like, of course, the rich do things to keep themselves rich and do things to keep the poor poor, which we already are aware of in this book from the fact that putting your name in that reaping more and more and more means you're going to be more and more likely to just no longer exist, and therefore no longer able to challenge anything because you don't exist. And the poor people are forced to only focus on survival. They have no choice but to only focus on survival. Katniss' main focus, her entire first third of this book is like, or before she gets off to the reaping, like all she cares about is trying to survive. Like, she doesn't even have a chance to sit here and debate government politics with anybody because she doesn't even know where her next meal is coming from. Like, it's so extreme, but it also feels like just like prophetic. And this theme is explored because she says, how would I spend the hours I now commit to combing the woods? Like, what do those people in the Capitol do all day? What do they even do with their time? They have so much of it. They could, like, time itself being this finite thing as well that is limited to you when you're in the lowest. This book really, I just love Peeta. All the things that man does and says, and everything is indicating to me that like he is great and loves her, but like it's just, we don't know for sure. There's no way to know for sure unless Suzanne writes it. Also, this, I don't remember this in the movie. There's a scene in which before Katniss goes off to the games, she's interacting with this woman who has her tongue cut out, and she's an Avox. She's an Avox. And the Katniss is like racking her brain trying to find out, how do I know her? Where do I know her from? And we get this flashback in Katniss' mind that she had seen her in the past when she was hunting with Gale, and the Capitol was coming for this woman, and Katniss didn't do anything. So we get the story about this like hovercraft coming for this Avox girl, and there's this line that just hits so incredible because she says, I'm ashamed I never tried to help her in the woods. I let the Capitol kill the boy and mutilate her without lifting a finger, just like I was watching the game. Again, the visual thing, this is it. This, like, it feels like we have this visual representation of absolute horrible, horrific crimes going on in our face. But if you imagine them happening actually, physically, personally, in front of you, like, would you still just be sitting there? Would you still just be so complacent and not doing anything to help those people? And in this case, she's saying she still did. She still sat there and didn't do anything. I also think that, I don't know if it was intentional or not, I think that Suzanne's trying to make Katniss less likable. Because there's like a scene with Peeta where he's displaying his skill with the cake decorating or whatever, and it says that it annoys Katniss. She says, that annoys me. So is she irritated that someone else can be good at something? You know, it's possible. Okay, also this scene, because I know so vividly what happens at the end of the second movie, this scene in which she's trying to display her skill set and the game makers aren't paying her any attention, and she wants to shoot that arrow at the pig, and shooting the arrow at the pig causes these people to pay attention to her, is such brilliant foreshadowing. It's immaculate. Immaculate. Next level shit. Again, also, there's a lot of, like, I wonder if Suzanne Collins was, I think she was like a Girl Scout or something, or just hunted in the past because, or she just like wants to, because the way Katniss is written, she is so clearly like a hunter. Like, she hunts. And she said that if she was trying to kill those people with that suckling pig, then they would be dead. They would be dead. If she was trying to kill them, they would be dead. And I just think that that's a point in the unlikable category. And again, we go back to this agency, though. I love how she says, Haymitch and Effie are asking her, how did you walk out of there? Like, how did you leave after you threw the arrow? And she's like, I dismissed myself. I did it myself. I did what needed to be done myself. I walked out of the room. Also, this like love triangle thing is so important to the plot as well, because obviously Gale seems to represent everything in her past and what she experienced, like when she was hunting with him and all that. And then Peeta is like representing this like futuristic thing that she's going to, but Gale is like gives her like a safety and comfort, and he seems to be on her level when it comes to hunting as a skill. It's just a brilliant way to see how Katniss is having to grapple with two different lifestyles. Like, she even says her and Gale were thrown together by a mutual need to survive. This again, we have even more foreshadowing about this stuff to come in future books, where she's talking about how she's trying to get this people, like the crowd of people's attention, and she says, I can't shoot an arrow into the crowd. I mean, she shouldn't. That would have been interesting. I also find the commentary interesting about how Katniss is witnessing all these people in the Capitol and how they have all these different things done to their face, and how, again, that's such a literal translation of like how people who become super wealthy will change their face because they have the means to do so. Why are you doing that? Like, you could use your money to do so many other things. Even the cliffhangers from part 1 to part 2 to part 3 are just excellent. I mean, ending part 1 with she came here with me, incredible. I also seemed to have, I wrote all these little notes as I was reading, and there's so much in Katniss' head about how she feels guilty about the things that Peeta has done for her, and I relate to that on such a deep level, where I don't want to ever owe someone anything, but of course she's in these extreme circumstances where she doesn't want to owe this man anything, and he just continues to do things for her over and over and over again. Like, he gave her the bread, then he made her look more sympathetic by saying he was in love with her. And I love how there's like so many simple sentences that are just gut punches in this book, just over and over again. Like, I want to see the sky and the moon on the last night that no one will be hunting me. These circumstances that this character is put into are just so extreme. I can't even imagine thinking that the next day you could just be dead. Again, we have more reasons to love Peeta, because again, we have this whole point where he's saying, I don't want to just be a pawn in their games, like I want to do something. He is arguing for his own agency, which then makes me love him as a character even more. I love characters that are rebellious and anti-authority, and they want to stand up to the man. Like, they just are like, I don't want you to take away everything about me. It's just excellent. It's also interesting, I wrote, there's a line in here where she talks about cannibalism, how cannibalism is frowned upon in the games, and I'm just like, that's their line in the sand? That's the line in the sand of what everything else going on, they're like, oh no, we don't like it but you're okay with all the other stuff. I do feel like there was sort of this, to me, I think that these prequels that we're getting for the Hunger Games are explaining this a little bit more, like how the games have gotten to this point, because this doesn't do a whole lot within this specific book of explaining the whole process of how we ended up here. It just kind of says there's just this video that everybody watches that explains the history. And again, Katniss is thinking about how she sees like these birds, and these birds they're free and able to fly, and they can go anywhere they want in the whole world. And I think that's just a good metaphor, analogy for how she longs for that but can't have that. I've just also been thinking about how I'm so sure that I don't remember there ever being a moment in Katniss' head where she has a romantic thought about Peeta or Gale. She only uses either one of them to talk about how she feels in the moment, when it's like, I'm pretty sure she says like towards the end of the book, like she didn't even allow her brain to think about that, or even because she's so focused on survival, but she just knows that Gale was this comforting thing. And then of course, like, there's this scene where Peeta and her are like running and hiding in the woods, And she gets frustrated with PETA because she knows that Gale wouldn't be making the same dumb shit mistakes that PETA is making. I think also the commentary on these games and how the prospect of how you are literally in an arena forced to only look out for yourself just feels like this metaphor for like people who become so wealthy are only concerned with themselves and they don't want to do anything to help anybody else. And sort of absolute power corrupts absolutely. And of course, Katniss is a victim of the system and she's forced to have to only look out for herself. But like we talked about with PETA earlier, like he wants to have some sort of agency, and we've talked about agency a lot. And I think like with the ending and how PETA and Katniss like do what they do in order to try to prevent the Capitol from allowing them to kill each other. And of course, like the reason I want PETA's perspective as well, if I haven't said already, is because like when we get into the games and we know like PETA allies himself with these people, but we also know that like you're only doing what you can to survive. But then again, like he's with Cato and Foxface, as Katniss calls her. So earlier I was saying how I was curious if all these kids got in the arena and decided not to kill each other, what would happen. But we also know these game makers have like this room in the back and there's literally a fog that is poison, and they have berries throughout the arena as well that we know people eat are poison. So it's like even if these kids did nothing, like the Capitol is still gonna find a way to get people to be pitted against each other no matter what. Like even if this group of people tries to resist, the people in this room in the back are still going to do what they can and use their resources in order to try. Like what's going to happen is like this arena has things that will kill you, so you either get killed by those or you get killed by the people in the arena and you have your agency taken from you. It even says right here explicitly, it says every so often they kill a tribute just to remind the players that they can, but mostly they just manipulate us into confronting one another face to face. And again, there's like this theme in here about how Gale witnesses this girl in her beautiful, pretty dress, and he has these like thoughts about her, these comments that he makes to Katniss that are like, you know, and she's just a product of her circumstance. Like, and there's a constant, like, it seems interesting to me that Katniss is always having I'm gonna try to hunt you down thoughts, but they're always about Cato. Like she's always thinking about Cato specifically. She has no desire to really hunt anyone else, but she does want to hunt Cato. Like there's a line where she's like, I'm coming for you. Like she is also kind of a predator, but she also clearly has this bias against Cato because he is also a product of his circumstances that he cannot control. He's in a district that he is in because he's just born into it. Again, to prove my point about Katniss being a hunter, there's literally a line in her head where she's like, I could kill them, every one of them. And again, there's definitely like a commentary on economics throughout here because Katniss is at a point where she needs medicine and she somehow ends up hurt, and there's commentary about how her access to the medicine is only possible because multiple people had to contribute to it. Like it wasn't just one sponsor that got her this medicine. It was multiple sponsors that had to get her this medicine. It's interesting to me as well because she and Katniss and Gale have a conversation at the beginning of the book where they're like, should we just run away from here? But it's like, it makes you curious, like, would she be in a better scenario? Because then what would have happened if maybe they had come for the reaping and they didn't call her name, they called her sister's name. Then her sister would have gone to the games and she would have had no recourse of action because she wouldn't be in the presence. You know, I love a good what if scenario. Like, what if they had ran away? That could be a whole, like, side fan fiction thing, you know, like we could just explore what that even looks like, what the repercussions of that are. But it just makes you curious, like what would have happened if her and Gale had just run away that day? Would she have seen Prim get called and then tried to run back as fast as possible? But because she was there, she was able to volunteer. And again, Katniss loves to hunt because she clearly says, if Cato broke through the trees right now, and again, she's thinking mostly about Cato and all of these thoughts. If Cato broke through the trees right now, I wouldn't flee, I would shoot. I find I'm actually anticipating the moment with pleasure. I love all the scenes where Rue and Katniss team up, strategize together, share each other's resources, show the value in that, how coming together and doing what you can to support each other makes a small difference. Again, we have commentary, again, about labor and how Rue's from the district where they make the crops, but she herself and her family cannot eat the crops. So they are producing the food, producing a product, and they have no access to the product, similar to things that happen in the fashion industry or the food industry of the real world. Also, Rue and Katniss are having a conversation when they're doing all these things where they're sharing resources, and there's a specific line that Katniss is thinking where she's like, we have so little communication with anyone outside of our district. So Katniss therefore has no idea what it is like for people in the other districts. Like, she's unaware of what's going on. And I think awareness, there's so much value in just the awareness alone, because that's the first step, I think, in making a difference. This book even has commentary on like neurodivergence in a way, because Rue, again, this whole like setup with Rue and Katniss and all the social commentary, political commentary, Rue's talking about this kind of food that her people aren't allowed to eat. And then she says there's this boy who took the food and he ate the food, but he wasn't in his right mind. He wasn't really grasping the concept or the severity of his actions, and then he ends up dead. And there's no really nuance in this world set up here where this boy isn't thinking how most people think and just wants to play with like this food or just eat this food and ends up dead. Of course, also Katniss is talking to Rue about Peeta and all the stuff Peeta says and the romance part of it, and Rue is like Katniss is all, yeah, that act that he's throwing on, and Rue's like, oh, I didn't think he was acting. She's like, I legit thought he was in love with you. And once again, Katniss says she stays thinking about hunting, okay? Like, she stays. She says, I could kill it from here if I had a mind to. I could kill anyone. I love this line. This is a very simple line, but again, it's with Rue and Katniss. Like, all of these things that Suzanne does to build the relationship between Rue and Katniss and show the value of them just talking to each other, just them having a conversation. Katniss has learned so much about the outside world just by having a conversation, just by hearing a few words from this girl one district over, and it has given Katniss so much information. And then this beautiful line where they're about to go to sleep, and Katniss just says, I realize how lonely I've been in the arena and how comforting the presence of another human can be. Just how comforting. I'm gonna cry because we all know what's coming, okay? Like, we know what's coming. I love Rue and Katniss relationship. As short as it is, it's very well developed. And again, we have this like commentary of the oppressed people aren't able to experience art, focus on, because Rue is saying how she loves music, and Katniss' first question is like, you have time for music? Like, you have even time to do anything with music at all? And Rue is like, we sing at home and we sing at work, and that's why I love that pen, because she has the Mockingjay pen. And then Katniss tries to give Rue the Mockingjay pen because it means more to Rue than it would to Katniss, but Rue's like, no, I like seeing it on you. And again, we compare Rue's resources to even just Prim's resources. Prim has her sister. She has Peeta's dad, the baker guy, who's going to help make sure she doesn't go hungry. She still has her mom. Like, she has these people that can help her, and Rue has, actually it says Rue has only me, which is beautiful because Katniss is not just anyone. I tabbed so many times that she thinks about Cato. She cannot wait to kill this man, which is then just this interesting commentary, because it's like, clearly Katniss has this bias against Cato, and Cato is a product of his circumstance. Like, obviously everyone's a product of their circumstance. Everybody comes into the world with whatever, happens before them, whatever their ancestors, all that is like important. But they themselves, you can only really like judge them, or you just have to look at what actions they're doing in their current life and use those to determine how you feel about them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a term, like, it casts long shadows, like the sins of the father cast long shadows, which I just think is interesting. I mean, I don't know anything about Cato's parentage. I just know what district he's from, but it's just interesting to me that, like, of course, Cato, we've seen from the beginning of the book, like, he's clearly a volunteer tribute. Like, he's excited to be in the games. Like, he's very, like, gladiator-ish, like, really just can't wait to get in there and start swinging, But it appears that Katniss, may be just as excited to get in that arena. She was very quick to volunteer, but was it 100% just to save her sister? I think that was a huge part of it, obviously. But, like, from her perspective, we know she loves to hunt. So very soon after we get all of this beautiful conversation with Rue and Katniss, the tributes come, the career tributes as they're called. They come, do what they do, and then Rue is killed. And the scene that happens after the writing in here, the fact that Rue just told her how much music means to her, and I know the song from the movie, like when Katniss sings it, but I think the book does an even better job of getting you to care about Rue and her family and her district. So it just means that much more. You know, in this book, obviously, like horrible things are happening, but music being this beacon, this hope, because it says the words are easy and soothing, promising tomorrow will be more hopeful than this awful piece of time we call today. Piece of time is such a short and succinct way to just explain like just this snapshot of like what we're even just this little glimpse we're getting into this like potential futuristic society. The fact that District 11 sees what happens on this screen and they send Katniss food that they themselves are unable to eat, it's very moving. I love how also there's this callback to what Peeta said. He said he wants to be more than a piece in their games, and Katniss is having a thought that she says that she herself also wants to show the Capitol whatever they do or force us to do, there's a part of every tribute they can't own, that Rue was more than a piece in their games. It's interesting to me because I feel we've gotten from the first, like half-ish of the book, like we have Katniss' perspective. We know that she is feeling guilty about what happened with like the Avox. We know she feels upset about the way the Capitol is set up. She's annoyed, she's bothered, she's unhappy. But it's interesting to me to think about how Rue's death is what seems to set her on this trajectory of like, now I need to take down the system. This character dying is what has taken me to now care. It has taken like waiting up until things have gotten so terrible. Of course, like the whole system is already like, we already knew that like only one person's coming out of these games, like we already knew that. But like to get in the games, to be in the arena, to see the person die in front of you, to hear their story, and then now you're like, fucking hate the Capitol. Like we could have hated them a little bit earlier. I feel like we could have hated them before we got here. But of course, I know Susanna's exploring like how the games came about in all of her prequels and stuff, and I still need to read, so. But it's just an interesting thought that it's like, it took someone dying to, she always cared, but it just increased, exacerbated the caring nature. And like at the end of part 2, it's revealed that these game makers are going to allow 2 people to win. And I think they have done this because of what Peeta has done and set up, right? Obviously, like in the book, we don't really get the game maker's perspective. We don't get Snow's perspective. We are so focused on Katniss and in the games and only seeing what she sees. So I know that the movie, from what I remember, like it just gives us a much wider scope of what's happening, because I think in the movie we get like a scene in which they like discuss having 2 victors, but we don't get that at all in the book. We just know that it's happening. Like we just hear it over the announcement, just like Katniss. So, and she's not able to talk to Haymitch. Like her mentor and her are not able to speak. Like the only thing that she can do, the only way that she can communicate is by looking at this camera and making faces, like, or saying something to someone else that's like hopefully ending up on the camera. There's no direct communication about a strategy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's interesting how in the book we have like only her thoughts to go on when she's thinking, oh, I bet Haymitch wants me to do this. But again, we don't know that for sure because we only have her thoughts to go on. But of course, we do know that they announced that there's going to be 2 winners. So then Peeta and Katniss like really amp up the romance, because they're like, well, if we can get these star-crossed lovers together, like maybe we can get people to care. If we throw some romance in there, maybe people will care, which I'm realizing is a whole other commentary in and of itself. It's like, oh, if we show how these people are human and have feelings for other humans by wanting to be with them romantically, maybe people will care. Again, another point in the fact that Katniss is an asexual, like, I don't know if I want to go there. This girl clearly does not care to kiss either boy. She has no thoughts about kissing a boy. She has no thoughts about how cute or handsome a boy is. She only knows to be romantic with this person to survive. And the first time her and Peeta kiss, her thoughts are, all I can register is how unnaturally hot his lips are from the fever. She's not thinking whether she enjoyed the kiss or not. She's not thinking, wow, that was great. She's thinking, why are his lips so hot. Oh yeah, he has a fever, which is not what I would want to be thinking when I'm kissing someone. In fact, we then know from earlier on in the book that her mother, Katniss' mother, is completely and utterly devastated and wrecked and destroyed by the death of her husband, and is like completely out of it. And Katniss is even sitting here thinking like, I've never been in love like that. The way she almost stopped living, Katniss' mother, when he died. Even again, we talked about before how the more resources that you need, the more times you can put your name in the cup for the reaping. But again, we also know that the farther and farther into these games, the more and more expensive it is to buy a gift for one of these tributes, one of the people in the arena. It becomes more and more expensive, therefore making it harder and harder and harder to support these people in this terrible place. The economic commentary in here is just insane. The commentary on war and social class is astronomical. It's even articulated so well that she says a full meal on day 1 buys a cracker on day 12. Like, the visualness of that at the beginning you can, what costs the same cost of a full meal by the end of the game is now so much like crumbs. Things just go up and up in price, and the scarcity of commodities, crazy too. This backstory about the goat, don't believe I remember seeing that in the movie, but like Katniss' motivations to get this goat are not like, she's not thinking to herself like, oh, this goat will help my family. She's thinking like, this goat is gonna make my sister happy. It's crazy. Like, this scene with Gale and Katniss, they go to pick up a goat. It's so simple. It's so simple, but it's so powerful. It's so simple, but it's so powerful. Katniss goes to get this goat. This goat is damaged. It's unsure whether it will live or die. It's on the brink of death, it seems. And Katniss is thinking, well, we probably maybe be able to save it. Of course, if we take it home and it dies, like, that's gonna suck. But if we take it home and we can nurse it back to health, it's gonna be a gold mine. It's gonna be a great resource for us and our family. And Prim loves animals. She loves to take care of animals. And she explains this whole story to Peeta, and Katniss' focus on the story is like, it's gonna be a gold mine. Like, that goat is going to help so much because of what it can do for our family in the terms of like the milk we can get from the goat to at least help us like have a somewhat full belly ever. And Peeta says, Katniss says that goat was going to be a gold mine. And Peeta says, of course, I was referring to that and not the lasting joy you gave your sister that you love so much. And it just shows that Katniss has never, like, all she's focused on is survival. All she can think about is survival. She has no time or energy to think about anything but survival because of all of the oppression these people are experiencing. Again, there's like a scene where the Capitol comes on to like the speaker or whatever and says, okay, we have these resources that you can come and get if you'd like, but they're all gonna be in the same place because they are, again, trying to make sure that people are watching and entertained and focused on the child murder that is occurring. And then everybody has to strategize and think, what's going to be our plan to get these backpacks that have resources, like that every single pairing or every single group that's left has to get in order to survive. Again, there's just so many little simple discussions happening in this book that have such bigger, wider implications. There's a scene where Thresh, who is Rue's other tribute from the same district, lets Katniss go. He lets her run away. He doesn't kill her. He doesn't attack her. He doesn't do anything to hurt her because of what she did for Rue. And Katniss explains this to Peeta, and Peeta is confused. He's like, I don't understand. And Katniss is like, I don't expect you to understand it. You've always had enough. If you had lived where I lived, I wouldn't have to explain it, because you would just understand not having to owe someone something is value in and of itself. And again, we're talking about, like, Peeta's kind of like, well, am I too stupid to understand it? Like, you could explain it to me. So we have also the commentary of like people's circumstances affecting your own opinion of them, and maybe she could explain it to him and maybe he could get it, but also maybe he would never get it. But if you don't try to explain it, you'll never know. Again, using the love triangle to perfectly encapsulate these themes in this book, because Katniss is in her internal monologue thinking about the conversations that she's had with Gale and wondering what Peeta would think of those conversations. When she's thinking, she literally is like, what would Peeta think of the banter between me and Gale about just regularly breaking the law, not caring about these regulations, just constantly going out in the woods hunting as we should not, doing things that are explicitly against the government. I think the book does make it pretty explicitly clear that Peeta has feelings for Katniss, but I also think the book makes it explicitly clear that Katniss has no feelings for anyone except for her sister, and she probably has friendship feelings for Gale and appreciates Gale for being there for her, but she doesn't ever have a romantic thought about either one of these boys. Like when Peeta says, "Don't die" to Katniss, and he says, "You're not doing me any favors," it's so horrible, but so romantic, but so horrible. It's romantic for Peeta. He is clearly in love, and yet Katniss feels nothing that is similar to what Peeta feels. She just thinks to herself, like, I don't want to have to kill this boy. I don't want to hurt this boy. Like, I want him to be able to come back home. You know, that's all she seems to think about is like the ways in which his death will affect the people back in the district, the ways her death would affect, like how just what would happen based off of all these different outcomes. I do love this line regarding the love triangle and Katniss' feelings about romance, where she says, "Whatever I'm feeling, it's no one's business but mine." I wish that the movie had talked about her father's singing voice, because it's clearly important. And the Mockingjays like copy him and sing like he does. Sorry, the birds stop and listen to him because he's such an incredible singer. And this line where we earlier heard like Rue and Katniss talking about music and how Katniss is like, y'all even have time for that, and then Katniss is in her thoughts thinking about, maybe I'm dismissing music because it hurts too much, because it reminds me too much of my father, because I think about how he sang and how beautiful it was, and she can't let herself go there or think that, and that's why she's like had this mental block with music. There's so much conversation in this book about Haymitch games also. Like towards this last third of the book, Peeta and Katniss are like, how do you think Haymitch won his games? Like, and then they have a whole discussion where they theorize about how he won the games, which makes me want to read Sunrise on the Reaping so bad. Again, there's a very simple line which outlines the importance of the visualness of this setup, where Katniss wants privacy so bad. She's like, she wants privacy where I can let any emotion cross my face without being seen. She just wants to feel an emotion without it being broadcast everywhere. Once again, as I already said, we have so many themes about Katniss and her agency within this book, and as we get towards the end of the book, Katniss starts to allow herself to think that there is an actual reality that she might make it out of these games. And then she instantly starts to think, well, so then if I do make it out of these games, what will my life look like? What will I actually be able to do with my time and my resources? Because so much of my time has been spent focusing on just surviving. And this line, she says, "You take that away, I don't really know who I am," which just shows us again that she's been so forced to focus this whole time on just survival. And if not having to focus on survival could be changed, what could her future look like? And it just makes you, I clearly see the like real world parallels of like, if people didn't have to focus on just surviving or just making enough money to get by to feed their families, like if they actually had the time and energy to work on, I don't know, creative projects, like things could look so different in a way. This is what else is crazy. This line about how it's like, even though she's a victor, if she decides to have children, those children can still be reaped. They can still be called into the games. So even though you yourself are a victor, there is still no safety for your future generations. It's also crazy to me how the ending of this book, and I don't remember if this was in the book, I think it kind of was in the movie, but in the book, all the tributes are dead. Like towards the end, there's a couple people left. And then like these holograms that are, or these like animalistic creatures are coming for Katniss and Peeta and I think Cato are like the final three left, right? And the eyes of these animals are the fallen tributes. So it's like, not only do we force ourselves to look at these people that have died throughout the games, but then even after their death, we are forced and confronted with them again. Like it's so in your face how many times you have to be confronted with the fact that people are dying in this book. It's just constantly being thrown at you. So like it forces you to examine what's going on here. It's, again, the thing that I constantly kept thinking throughout this like first time that I was reading it, I just kept thinking like, it's crazy to think about people watching this game on the screen and just genuinely viewing it as entertainment and thinking how great it is, but it is such a real world parallel to what is happening, and how like people just aren't doing anything, not doing any action, not doing anything to help. And that is like we've talked a lot about, or I've talked a lot about, how there's this theme of people and their circumstances disliking people because they are in these positions of power, but they are in those positions due to like their where they come from, and they can't help that. And then like all these people in the Capitol are just watching this horrendous game going on over and over and over again, but they just have this thing in their brain where they're just like not, they have to like force themselves to not confront the reality of what it is, because if they did, then I guess they would have to acknowledge how complacent they have been in what's going on in their society, which is like, hello, like to it's so clear and apparent that you should stop being complacent. Everyone should stop being complacent. Like, what else is it going to take? What else will have to happen in order for you to do something? How many more people have to be destroyed? Do we even if it was on a huge screen in your face, people still don't take action? The way that Katniss thoughts are, what Katniss is thinking about when all this stuff happens with Cato, and how she's like, he's in all the suffering, and how she just hears him in agony this whole entire time. Again, we're being forced to confront what it would be like to have to be in an arena and just hear the agonizing cries of death over and over again. And she starts to eventually feel like she wants to put him out of his misery, but she can't because she's worried that he's going to come for her. And again, if the entire premise of these games, the visuals, the romance, like if all of this has still not been enough to convince you, we are then confronted with Katniss and Peeta's like interaction once the game makers have decided, just kidding, only one person can remain, only one person will be left standing, because that is how the games work. And then they are arguing about who should kill the other, and Katniss says to Peeta, you shoot me and then go home and live with it, because she's like, this is the option, either you shoot me and you have to go home and deal with it, or she has to shoot him and she has to go live in the reality knowing that she killed this person. And this line of thinking right here is so good, and it reties back into themes about how we're supposed to not lose our own agency, not lose the focus of the little tiny things that we ourselves can do. Don't think that your tiny actions don't have, because the whole thing is Katniss is having a thought to herself where she's like, yes, we have to have one victor. The whole point of the games is to have one victor. So if there are no victors, then they will have done something. They will have done some sort of action that could have repercussions. They could have done something to cause the Capitol to look worse. They want to kill both of themselves in order to cause a chain reaction. I find also this visual so fascinating, because as soon as Peeta and Katniss are removed from the arena, the very first thing that happens is that the Capitol completely like cleans them up, gets rid of their bruises, gets rid of everything, just completely erases any scars, anything that is like any visual representation that could have been left to show what happened to them. It's like this washing, this like, what's the word, like, it's just this washing, the clean, just removing anything. It's like there must be a term for this, like when you are trying to remove history in a way, because you are getting rid of scars, like you're not seeing the effects of what has happened in the past, and you're just trying to act like everything is fine and that nothing wrong has ever happened, is just ridiculous. And then they completely wash Katniss, give her the bath, like remove any indication that she's ever gone through these horrible events. And then it says that like the Capitol is going to act like they've controlled the narrative this whole time. They've gotten the information, they've seen the actions, and they're like, okay, like we're gonna spin this and make it seem like this was our plan all along. Because if anyone got any indication whatsoever that they were anti-Capitol, if they were against what's going on in the Capitol, like if anyone in the Capitol knew that, they would come for her immediately. They would come straight for her. But again, we talk about Katniss' agency, because right after she has that thought, she thinks to herself, but it'll only work if I play along with them. So we'll see. I need to find this term, because there's a term, I feel like there's this term that could be used to describe what's happening in this book here, but also just like, I think it's a horror. I'm thinking of it in like a horror sense, like don't look behind that door, like just acting like things are normal and everything's okay when, like, because what's happening right here is that they're rewatching the games. Like Katniss and Peeta are called back to rewatch the games, and it says there's this upbeat soundtrack playing under it, like this underlying horrific, terrible, awful thing, and then you have this like beautiful, melodic, pretty, flowery thing over it, and it's trying to cover up disgusting, awful, horrible things. Like trying to show the Hunger Games with like a cute little montage soundtrack. Like I just need, there's a word for it, because that's one of my, I love that in all storytelling forms. Okay, and then this like is very, very close to the end, like I was talking about, with all of the callbacks and the making you be forced to take a look at the atrocities of what's going on. Katniss was literally there. She was in the arena, but now they're watching the games back, and she's having these thoughts that are like, she literally says, I feel like it happens to people I have never met, because of the way it's happening on screen and the way that it's presented. It feels like these are people she doesn't even care about, when she was literally in the arena with these people, witnessing them directly in front of her be killed. But on screen, it creates this distance between people, which is just interesting as well in this day and age of social media and me making this behind a screen. Just, this is a fucking masterpiece. Again, Suzanne just does such a great job of a good old gut punch with just a few words. She says so much with so few words, by comparing how Katniss feels after the games, where she can't speak to Peeta, and she says she feels like a prisoner awaiting sentencing because she feels like she's done something, but she doesn't know exactly all the repercussions of what's going to happen because of her actions. And again, not only we have the visual medium, but we just have the Capitol constantly, frequently putting the games into everybody's consciousness. Like you just are always having to think about it, whether you are worried about your kids being in it, whether you are worried about yourself being in it, worried about like the resources that you need in order to just, it's crazy because like there's a whole victory tour. So you like Katniss, her whole life growing up, and like everyone in the society is forced to like see the victors. They do a whole victory lap tour where everyone has to see, is just like constantly barraged, reminded over and over again, beaten over the head with the fact that like, this is the Hunger Games, these are the winners, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, this is the world we live in, don't forget this is the world we live in, don't forget this is the world we live in, don't try to imagine a different future, this is the world we live in, don't forget, this is how it is, we live in a society with the Hunger Games and that's how it is, and there's nothing different, there's nothing anybody can do about it, don't forget, this is how it is, don't forget, this is the Hunger Games. And it just creates this atmosphere of like, it's clearly, I mean, this is like the 74th year in a row that it's happened. So clearly it feels like this astronomical, unbeatable, terrible thing. But like, when you think about how many things are human constructs, when you think about politics and how everything we have in society, the United States itself, the founding of the United States, the boss, like there's so much that we have because of history and people making a change and people making a difference. And I think that's really important to think about when you read this book. But I think I'm just going to end it with how Miss Suzanne really used the love triangle to her fucking advantage here, because she ended it with the whole conversation Peeta and Katniss are having, or Peeta and Haymitch and Katniss are all having. Like Peeta is coming to the realization that maybe Katniss never felt anything for him, and now Katniss is feeling terrified of, not only is she terrified of what President Snow might be doing to her based off what's happened in this book, now she's terrified because Peeta is now realizing that maybe she faked it the whole time, and now she's going to have a lot to deal with. And now I really need to read the next book and hopefully make a whole nother deep critical analysis, talk about how, I mean, I'm sure they're all going to be 5 stars. Like even Mockingjay, I got hopes, okay? I got hopes, babe. I remember watching Mockingjay and thinking like, don't like that. But I think this is such a great book because of, like I was saying earlier, like the realization that we are where we are in today's society because of all the rebellions, all of the people who stood up, all the people who did everything they possibly could to create a better future for people. Like, I just have to focus on that in order to keep myself mentally sane. And I hope to become one of those people who does whatever they can to create a better future for the whole world. Because obviously, everyone benefits if we have a better world. So, I know that's a big, bold statement, but this is a big, bold book. 5 stars, if I didn't say already. If you've read The Hunger Games, watched the movies, everything you want to discuss, type it up, babe. I would love to see it, love to hear it. That's all. So I will leave my Instagram, Goodreads, and TikTok in the description for you to check out if you would like. Otherwise, have a great day. Bye.